Perseus. A cry went up among the people of the city of Argos. The king has returned, they shouted. At once a crowd ran out of the gates to meet the approaching chariot. The people crowded close to the king at Perseus, waiting for him to speak. The king did not seem eager to talk, however. In fact, he looked impatient and tired. What's the news? They asked eagerly. What's the news from the oracle at Delphi? The usual meaningless riddles, grumbled Agresius. Not worth the journey. Now out of my way. The people quickly moved aside and stared after their king. They were puzzled. The oracle had always spoken truthfully, and everyone had expected happy news. Why, then, was their king so disagreeable? Alone in his palace, Acrisius brooded. He was not at all happy about what the oracle had said, and now he sat puzzling over what to do. His reason for going to Delphi had been well known. Acrisius had but one child, a lovely daughter named Danae, but he needed a son to take over the throne upon his death, so he had asked the oracle if he would ever have such a son. The priestess' answer had been anything but a riddle. You will have no son, Acrisius, she said. The king's heart sank at this. Then the priestess added still more disturbing words. But your daughter will have a grandson, a fine, brave hero, and when he is grown, he will kill you. Acrisius had shuddered when he heard this terrible prophecy, and now, remembering it, he shuddered again. At that moment, Danae approached the throne. She was indeed a beautiful young woman, yet the sight of her beauty did not please Acrisius. Why couldn't she have been a son? And why was she fated to give birth to his murderer? Danae could read none of these thoughts in her father's face, yet she knew something was wrong. Father, you look so tired from your travels, she said. Can I do anything to make you feel better? Nothing, said Acrisius briefly. Nothing for now. Danae nodded and quickly left the room. As the king watched her go, his anger surged. It cannot happen. It will not happen, he declared. Acrisius spent the whole night thinking what to do. He was a cold and unloving man. It would have brought him no sadness to put Danae to death. Yet he feared the gods. They harshly punished mortals who murdered their own children. By morning, the king had an idea. He summoned his metal workers and said, I want a house to be built, a special house, a house of solid bronze. As the worker gasped, Acrisius added, Also, this house must be completed before the new moon rises, so begin at once. The workers scurried to their tasks, and as the king ordered, the house was finished before the new moon rose. Once the last bronze bit was in place, the king called for his daughter. In his coldest voice, he told her to go into the house, along with 2 women servants. Then he ordered the doors sealed shut behind them. Before anyone could think to protest, the deed was done. Acrisius was still not content. He commanded that a great hole be dug. Silently, the workers obeyed him. When the hole was deep enough, the king commanded, Now lower the house into the hole, and cover it with dirt. You will leave only one small hole over the roof. The white-faced workers turned to stare at the king's guard. Then they again picked up their shovels. Yet their hands sweat when they thought about what they were doing. Yes, Danae would live. Through the little hole could come light, air, and food. Whatever else the gods might call Acrisius, he would not be a murderer. But what kind of father was he? When the job was finished, Acrisius rubbed his hands with satisfaction. There, he muttered to himself. Let's see the girl give birth to my murderer now. As for Danae, she was at first terrified. Then, when she saw she wasn't going to die, for food was lowered through the hole each day, she grew sad. Finally came boredom. Weeks and months went by. There was nothing new to talk to her maids about, so no new games to play. So Danae sat silently for hours at a time. She would stare up into the thin shaft of sunlight, recalling the clouds and sky. Or when it rained, she would listen to the rattle of drops on the roof. She would even try to catch the drizzle that fell through the roof hole. She liked doing that. At least it was a change. Then, when the boredom seemed intolerable, something odd took place one day. As Danae sat gazing at the sky, a chilly breeze blew into the house. Danae shivered all over. Suddenly, the breeze was followed by a shower of gold. It flowed into the room in the middle of a sunbeam. Once inside, the golden stream twisted and turned about the house. Though her maids drew back in fear, Danae laughed aloud. She even reached out and tried to grab the golden shower, but it quickly moved away from her. She chased it all about the room, but couldn't catch it. Whatever it was, Danae knew the golden shower was alive. At last, Danae sank tiredly into a chair. The golden shower stopped as soon as she paused. Then it crept closer until it was embracing her. The room, so chilly just a moment before, grew warm and cozy. Who are you? Asked Danae dreamily. Why don't you speak to me? No answer came. The golden shower hovered about her silently. Then it rolled together in a glittering ball. In a flash, it flew toward the ceiling and vanished through the roof hole. With her strange new friend gone, Danae sat in sadness for a moment, but somehow she knew that the golden shower would return. And return it did, day after day. Danae at last realized just what or who the golden shower was. It had to be Zeus himself, king of all the gods. Danae had heard stories about Zeus. She knew he visited and loved mortal women in many different forms. Now she wished Zeus would appear before her in his true form. In fact, she asked him to do so many times, but the god kept silent. He remained in his golden shower throughout all of his visits. Whenever he left, Danae would shrug sadly. He has to keep up his disguise, I suppose, she'd say. After all, I hear that his wife Hera is terribly jealous. She doesn't like her husband spending time with mortal women. More weeks and months went by. Acrisius never suspected a thing. Now and again he would visit the bronze house just to see that Danae was still there. It was one of those visits that he heard a noise that made his heart stop. It was the sound of a baby crying. Acrisius couldn't believe his ears. He darted to the hole and gazed down into Danae's room. To his horror, he saw his daughter nursing a boy. Whose baby is that? He shouted. Mine, of course, replied Danae. A likely story. And who might the father be? Zeus himself. He visits me almost every day. I've named the boy Perseus. It came to me in a dream. I don't know what it means, but I think it's a nice name. What do you think of it? Acrisius knew very well what the name Perseus meant. It meant avenger. Acrisius realized his effort has failed. The grandson the oracle had warned him about had been born. Still, he wasn't ready to give in to the prophecy. But how was he supposed to protect himself now? A son of Zeus, she tells me, thought the king. Can it possibly be true? If it is, I can't risk putting the boy to death. The gods don't look kindly on having their children murdered by mortals. So Acrisius came up with a different plan. He ordered the bronze house to be dug up. Then he enclosed Danae and the baby Perseus in a great wooden chest. Lastly, the chest was bound shut and pushed out into the sea. With a savage smile, Acrisius watched it float away. Well, Zeus, he said, it's up to you now. If the boy is really your son, come to his aid. I, for one, am through with him. But never let it be said that I killed him. That knowledge would have been small comfort to Danae. She sat huddled in the darkness, holding her son tightly. Back and forth the sea tossed them. Heavy waves lashed the chest. Through all the confusion and terror, little Perseus never cried. He lay patiently and quietly in his mother's arm. It was as if he knew they would be soon safe. As for Danae, knew no such thing. She wanted to pray to the gods for help, but she couldn't stop weeping. Why? She cried. Why has my father done this to us? Hours went by. The chest grew colder and colder. Danae realized that night had finally fallen. How long the day had been, she wondered. How many nights they would spend in this misery. Would they starve to death or be drowned? At last, Danae raised her voice in a prayer. Lord Zeus, she cried, you are the father of this child. Is this how you protect him? Is death all that you wish for him? At those words, the chest shuddered. Danae felt as though it were being raised high in the air. Then she felt it come down again. Suddenly, the chest was still. Danae knew they were now on dry land, but how were they to get out? Lord Zeus, she prayed again, it is well and good that you've saved us from the sea. But are we to remain in this awful box forever? Send us some rescuer, please. If you won't do that, then throw us back in the sea, let us drown, and be done with it. At that very moment, she heard a loud pounding on the box. Hello, came a voice. Is anybody there? Danae answered with a wild shriek of joy. Soon the chest was opened, holding her baby. Danae climbed out onto an island beach. She found herself standing face to face with a fisherman. "Where are we?" asked Danae. "The island of Seriphos," explained the fisherman. "And I am Dictys. Many fish have I caught in my day, but not none quite like you." At that, Danae managed a weak smile, and even Perseus seemed to grin. Dictys took an instant liking to the sad young girl and her baby. He took them to his house. There he and his wife soon made the castaways at home. For some years they all lived happily together. Perseus grew into a strong, healthy lad. He learned to fish from Dictys, who treated him like a son. But happy as he was, Perseus was also restless. He had the feeling that he was meant for great adventures. Much as he liked fishing, there was nothing heroic about it. One day, Dictys' brother, Polydictys, paid a visit to the household. Polydictys was the king of Seriphos. He was both wealthy and powerful, but he was no kinder or loving than Acrisius. He thought nothing of letting his brother live than the life of a poor fisherman. When Polydectes saw the beautiful Danae, he instantly fell in love with her. He kissed her hand and said, "Come back to my palace with me. I'll make you my queen." But Danae politely refused. "I'm already loved by the god Zeus himself," she said simply. "Surely you don't want to make the king of the gods jealous." After that, Polydectes came to visit almost daily. Every time he came, he asked Danae to marry him, and every time he asked her, Danae quietly refused. Perseus frowned upon these constant visits. He didn't like this rude king who kept bothering his mother, but he didn't say a word for fear of embarrassing her. One day, Perseus decided to confront Polydectes about the annoying visits, so he went to the palace and stood before the throne. "King Polydectes," he said, "kindly show the manners to leave my mother alone." "I don't know what you mean," protested Polydectes. "Yes, you do," insisted Perseus. "She doesn't want to marry you, so stop bothering her." Polydectes chuckled. "My boy, you quite misunderstood me," he said. "I didn't really mean it. I was only paying her a compliment, and I don't believe your mother took me seriously. But if it will make you happy, I'll leave her alone." Perseus felt ashamed of himself. How could he have made such a silly mistake? He'd proven himself a terrible fool. Perseus quickly apologized, and the king accepted his apology. But the king was lying. He had thought of nothing but Danae day and night, and now he could see that Perseus was his enemy. The boy had to be gotten rid of. Polydectes thought hard and fast. Then a devilish idea occurred to him. With a smile, he stood up. "Since that is settled, I'd be pleased to show you my palace. Come with me, Perseus." So the king and young man walked through the palace halls talking. At the end of the tour, Perseus turned to his host. "It must be wonderful to be king," he explained. "You can do whatever you want, have whatever you please." "Ah, not everything," sighed Polydectes. "There is one treasure I've never been able to get." "And what is that, my lord?" asked Perseus. "The head of Medusa," said Polydectes. Then the king told Perseus all about Medusa. She and her two sisters were known as the Gorgons. Once they had been beautiful women, but their enormous vanity had finally angered the gods, so they were turned into horrible creatures with wings and tusks. Perhaps most ghastly of all, they had snakes instead of hair. The sisters were also cursed in other ways. Whoever looked at them was immediately turned into stone, and two of the sisters could never die. Only Medusa was mortal. "Ah, the head of Medusa," Polydectes explained. "That would be a fine price indeed. Why, I could turn my enemies to stone in an instant. But it's not to be, I fear." The king waited a moment for the words to sink in. Then he said to Perseus, "Well, you must excuse me, boy. I have many preparations to make. You see, I'm getting married." Polydectes gave a mocking smile when he saw Perseus's alarmed look. "Oh, not to your mother, of course. A bride from another island, and a good deal wealthier than your mother, if I dare say." Perseus blushed at this. Polydectes clapped Perseus on the back. "So I really must be going. I would love to invite you to the wedding, but—" Polydectes gave another mocking smile. "Well, most people will feel obliged to bring quite an expensive gift," he shrugged. Perseus felt his face burning again. His poverty had never bothered him before, but now he saw that it kept others from viewing him as an equal. It was as though he were less than human. Pride bubbled up in Perseus. He would bring Polydectes a gift worthy of a king. "There is one present I can give you, something priceless," he said. "The head of Medusa." With that, Perseus gave a proud smile and turned away. Polydectes grinned wickedly as he watched the young man march off. This was exactly what he'd hoped for. There was to be no wedding at all, of course. He'd made that up to trick Perseus, and the trick had worked. The foolish boy was on his way to face Medusa. That's the last I'll see him, chuckled Polydectes. Now nothing stands between me and his mothers. Meanwhile, Perseus' pride began to cool somewhat. As it did, he saw all the problems he faced. In the first place, he didn't even know where to find Medusa, let alone how to kill her. Well, I could only find out by asking. Perseus finally said to himself. So as he walked along, he stopped everyone he met. Excuse me, can you tell me where the Gorgon Medusa lives? Some people laughed, others only stared, but no one could give him a good answer. At last, Perseus looked up to the sky. He called out to the heavens, Father Zeus, I've never asked you for help before, but I need it now. Please speak to me. Tell me where these Gorgons live. A sudden motion in front of him caught Perseus's eye. He quickly lowered his gaze and found three wonderful people standing in front of him. They were seemed to have they seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. One of the three was a handsome young man with a winged helmet and winged shoes. The next was a beautiful woman with gray eyes carrying a great shield. The other was an older bearded man. He seemed dark and threatening. Perseus was startled out of breath. Surely you are gods, he said at last. Is one of you Zeus himself? The three gods laughed. I'm afraid not, said the young man with the wings on his feet and head. Zeus is busy with other matters, but I'm his personal messenger, Hermes. And I'm Zeus's daughter Athena, said the woman. I don't bring you war today, just wisdom and knowledge. And I'm Hades, said the dark man. Zeus himself cannot come, but perhaps his brother and lord of the underworld will do. Perseus bowed his head low. Indeed, I have heard of you all many times before, he said humbly. But what brings you here? The three gods looked at one another. You prayed for help, didn't you? Asked Hermes. I did, said Perseus, but only to learn how to find Medusa. I'm young and strong and will do my best to kill her by myself. So surely I don't need three gods to tell me where she lives. Athena smiled and put her hand on Perseus's shoulder. Dear boy, she said, you can be as brave as you like, but to kill Medusa, you'll have to look at her, and if you look at her, you'll turn into stone. You might find it hard to kill her then. Perseus nodded. As you say, goddess, but I will still find a way. Athena smiled at his bravery. That is what we are here for, Perseus, to help you find a way. She removed her shield and gave it to Perseus. Here, she said, take this with you. It shines like a mirror. With it you can approach Medusa by looking at her reflection. Then, continued Hermes, strike her death blow with this. And he handed Perseus an excellent sharp sword. It will be easier if she can't see you, added Hades, handing Perseus a cap. If you wear this, you will be invisible. But what am I to put the head in? Asked Perseus. Athena presented him with a leather bag. Carry it in this, she answered. The bag will change size to fit in any object, however large or small. I thank you all, said Perseus. These gifts have doubtless saved my foolish life. But again, I must ask you where I can find Medusa and her sister. For that knowledge, you must seek out the Grey Woman, replied Hermes. They are the sisters of the Gorgons, but I warn you, they may not be eager to give directions. I'll make them tell me, declared Perseus. Where do these Grey Women live? Far to the west, answered Athena, in the land of twilight. Hermes removed his winged shoes and handed them to Perseus. Here, he said, these will carry you on your way, and take my winged hat too. You may need it as well. Perseus thanked the gods. Then, without another word, he put on the shoes and hat and flew away. Even with Hermes' wings, it proved to be a long voyage. For days, Perseus flew over land and sea. At last, Perseus found himself in the gloomy land of twilight. The sole signs of life were leafless, twisted trees growing among knife-like rocks. Everything was a ghastly gray, the color of something not quite dead and not quite alive. Only the sigh of the tired ocean and relentless wind stirred the heavy air. Perseus roamed about until he found the gray woman huddled together. Putting on Hades' cap, he crept closer. They were truly hideous creatures. Gray, wrinkled skin, ugly, sharp wings, long, skinny necks. They seemed more like vultures than women. They were also terribly old, so old that they only had one tooth and one eye among them. Perseus watched and listened as they chattered idly. He was shocked to see them passing the eye and tooth from one to another. Apparently they were taking turns seeing and eating. And now, thought Perseus, I must convince these creatures to give me directions. He waited for his chance. Finally, the woman in the middle spoke to her right-hand neighbor. Hand me that eye, she said. You've been hogging it too long. The woman on her right grumbled a little, but she removed the eye and started to hand it over. At that moment, Perseus darted forward, then snatching the eye, he skipped back. What is this? Growled the woman in the middle. I asked you for the eye. Now hand it over. It's gone, whined the woman on her right. What do you mean it's gone? Screeched the woman in the middle. Don't tell us you dropped it, groaned the woman on the left. Perseus spoke up. Don't concern yourself, he said. I have the eye. And who are you? Whined the woman in the middle. My name is Perseus, and I'm Zeus's son. I've come to ask where I can find your sisters, the Gorgons. The Gorgons, hissed one of the women. Our sisters don't like company, whispered the second, and they'll kill us if we give you directions, squealed the third. Ah, I see, said Perseus. He lightly tossed the eye up in the air and caught it as he spoke. Well, I wonder if you do. Would you really rather spend your life in darkness than give me a little information? Ah, well, if that is your decision, I'll bid you farewell. Perseus started to walk away, but before he'd gone the 3 steps, the woman anxiously called him back. In cracking voices they whispered, where the Gorgons could be found. Then Perseus thanked them and tossed the eye in their direction. He left the 3 of them scrambling for it. With Hermes' wings, sandals, and hat, Perseus was able to quickly search the island where the Gorgons lived. He knew immediately he had found the place. Statues of unlucky humans stood everywhere. At the sight of those frozen figures, Perseus shuddered. All these poor souls were victims of the Gorgons, and if he wasn't careful, he would be added to the collection. Perseus again put on Hades' cap of invisibility. Then, as quietly as possible, he crept towards the ruins of a temple. That was the place where the Gorgons lived, according to the Grey Woman. But as things turned out, Perseus didn't really need the cap. He found all the Gorgons fast asleep. Perseus backed toward them slowly. He was careful to look at only their reflections in Athena's shield. Even their reflections were terrible enough. Perseus could imagine how looking directly at them would turn anyone into stone. The sister in the middle was the most horrible of them all. Perseus was sure that the one in the middle was Medusa. Perseus inched as close as he dared. Then, gazing steadily into his shield, he raised his sword. At the last second, he breathed a prayer to Zeus. Then he swung the blade with blazing speed. His aim was strong and true. With one blow, he lopped off Medusa's head. At once, Perseus snatched up the head, still without looking at it. He felt the dying snakes writhe in his finger. It was a relief to drop it into Athena's leather pouch. Perseus turned to go, eager to escape from Medusa's 2 sisters, but at that moment, scenting their sister's blood, they awoke. Perseus's cap of invisibility protected him somewhat, but the sharp-nosed Gorgons could smell almost as well as they could see. In a moment they had discovered Medusa's death, and in another moment they smelled Perseus. With their horrid claws, the Gorgons reached out for Perseus. One even grasped his arm, but he managed to shake her off and slip free. As fast as he could run, Perseus fled from the temple. Yet the angry Gorgons refused to give up. Bounding from rock to rock, they followed him. Only the fact that they couldn't see him allowed him to keep ahead. Yet even at that, the Gorgons came so close that he felt their breath on his neck. Suddenly Perseus remembered his wings. With a happy cry, he leaped into the air. Behind him, he heard the roar of the defeated Gorgons. He also heard a voice by his side. Well done, my lad, said the voice. Perseus turned and looked. The god Hermes was flying beside him. Hermes, he explained Perseus, where did you come from? I have been with you all this time, so have Athena and Hades. I must say you carried it off perfectly. Thanks to your gifts, Lord, said Perseus, gifts which I will return to you the instant I land. Hermes chuckled. You'd better keep them for now, he said. You're not quite through with your adventures yet. Hermes vanished, but Perseus suspected that the gods were still close by. That thought comforted him on his long, lonely journey. After flying for several days, Perseus came across a strange sight. A great giant loomed up in his path. As Perseus's memory stirred, he recalled tales of the Titan Atlas. For his part in a war against Zeus, the Titan had been sentenced to carry the sky itself on his shoulder. Just as this giant was doing now, Perseus spotted something else of interest. Atlas's feet grew rich gardens and apple trees. Perseus suddenly realized he was very hungry. Kind Titan, said Perseus with a bow, I have traveled long and far without food and drink. Do you mind if I have one of your apples? Leave me and the apples be, little boy, roared Atlas. What have you done to earn them? Try bearing the weight of the entire heavens. Then you might deserve one. But not until then. Be on your way, thief. With these words, Atlas kicked great hills of dirt at Perseus. This made Perseus angry, and he reached for his sword. Then he recalled he had a more powerful weapon. Gentle Titan, said Perseus, I didn't come to steal anything. In fact, I've brought you something in return for your apples. Perseus reached inside his bag. Looking away, he pulled out Medusa's head and showed it to the Atlas. Then he returned the head to the bag and looked up. Even as mighty as Atlas was, Medusa's fearful eyes had worked their magic. The Titan was now a mountain of stone. Perseus suddenly felt sorry for the Titan. You've had to carry the sky so long, he said. Maybe now you can rest. Perseus again set off on his journey home, but as Hermes had said, more adventures awaited him. As Perseus flew over Ethiopia, he saw another strange sight. There, changed to a rock facing the sea, stood a young woman. Perseus flew toward the rock. He floated in front of the maiden, gazing at her. Never in his life had he seen such a sweet, lovely young woman. In turn, the maiden stared at Perseus. Naturally, she was startled to see a young man floating in the air. Who are you? She asked. Are you some god? Hermes, perhaps? Neither, I am afraid, said Perseus. Nevertheless, I would help you if I could. So tell me, why are you changed to this rock? My name is Andromeda, said the woman. I'm the princess of this land. My parents are King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopea. As for why I'm chained here, I fear my mother's words are the cause. She dared claim that she was more beautiful than any goddess. This infuriated the gods, so they sent a terrible sea serpent to eat our people, to save the kingdom. My parents went to the oracle for advice. There they learned our kingdom could be saved if I were sacrificed to this monster. Andromeda's voice shook a little and she paused. Then she added, So I wait for the serpent to come. But if you're immortal, you'd better not. I'd hate to see you killed as well. With these words, Andromeda lowered her head. Perseus had seen fear in her eyes, yet he also read determination. This woman would not cry or beg. You're very brave in the face of death, said Perseus. Where might I find your parents? They're standing on the shore, said Andromeda, watching and waiting. Without another word, Perseus flew towards Cepheus and Cassiopea. He found them both weeping for their daughter. Oh, this is all my fault, cried Cassiopea. This is what comes of my stupid vanity. There is no need for weeping, Perseus told them. I can save your daughter. I'm afraid that's impossible, said Cepheus. Perhaps not for me, said Perseus. With the help of the gods, I managed to slay the Gorgon Medusa. Hope and relief filled Cepheus and Cassiopea's faces. But tell me one thing before I kill this serpent, Perseus said. Will you give me your daughter's hand in marriage? Cepheus and Cassiopea eagerly agreed. With that, Perseus flew back to the rock where Andromeda stood. He returned just in time, for the serpent was heading straight for the cliff. The creature raised great waves as it came. Perseus dove down upon the terrible beast. He hovered for a moment. Should he use Medusa's head again? But the young man's pride stopped him. To prove himself to Andromeda, he would fight like a true hero. At once, Perseus darted in and stabbed the serpent in the shoulder. The creature writhed at the blow and rose up. With jagged teeth, it snapped at Perseus, but Perseus was too fast. Again and again, he pierced the monster's skin. At last, standing on a rock, he struck his final blow. The serpent gave an awful groan. Then he finally sank into the sea. For a moment, a stunned silence followed. Then wild cheers came from people who gathered to watch. But Perseus had ears only for Andromeda's cries of gratitude. Flying to her side, he sliced her chains off at once. Then he carried her back to her parents. I hope you haven't forgotten your promise, King Cepheus, said Perseus as he landed. Not at all, said the king, delightedly. Let the wedding begin at once. Just then another young man rushed forward. Andromeda, he cried, taking the princess by the hand. Thank the gods you are safe. Now we can be married. Perseus was puzzled indeed. Who is this fellow? He asked Cepheus. His name is Phineus, said the king, and he was engaged to marry my daughter. What do you mean by was? Demanded Phineus. If you truly loved Andromeda, you would have fought the serpent, said Cepheus, but you left that task to this fellow here, so I'm giving her to the worthier man. We'll see about that, said Phineus. He raised his sword and rushed toward Perseus. This time Perseus knew better than to use his sword. What would Andromeda think if she saw the man bloodily slain? Everybody close your eyes, he cried. Everyone except Phineus did as they were told. Then, turning his own eyes, Perseus pulled the Gorgon's head out of its bag. In mid-cry, Phineus suddenly felt silent. Perseus put the head back inside the bag and opened his eyes. Phineus' sword raised high and was now stone, and Andromeda were married with great joy. Afterwards they set sail for Seriphos. Once they reached the island, they were straight to Dictys' house. There Perseus joyfully introduced his bride to his mother, but poor Danae was too unhappy to rejoice. Perseus, noting her sad face, quickly asked what was wrong. Your marriage truly pleases me, Danae replied. But what is it, mother? Pressed Perseus. The king Polydectes has threatened to kill me if I don't marry him. I scarcely know which would be worse, to be dead or to be his wife. Perseus took his mother by the hand. Come with me to the king's palace, he said. However, you must promise to close your eyes when I tell you to. I promise, said Danae. But what are you going to do? I'm going to give away the bride, chuckled Perseus. With Danae at his side, Perseus was admitted to the palace at once. In the throne room, they found Polydectes drinking and laughing with his friends. So, Polydectes laughed wickedly, the intrepid hero returns. Your adventures proved too dangerous. I accept not at all, said Perseus simply. Well, why have you come? Growled the king. Are you here again to tell me to leave your mother alone? Certainly not, answered Perseus, smiling. Marry her with my blessing. Why, I've even brought you a wedding present. A wedding present? Asked the king. Don't you remember? Asked Perseus. I've brought the prize you said you longed for most. With these words he lifted the leather bag. Now, mother, he cried. Danae threw her arms across her eyes and Perseus tightly shut his own. Once again he lifted Medusa's head from the bag and replaced it. And once again the curse had worked. When Perseus opened his eyes, he found the king and his friends were statues. With Polydectes dead, Dictys became king. He begged Perseus, Danae, and Andromeda to stay in Seriphos. But the three of them decided to return to Argos. Perhaps now they could make peace with the king Acrisius. When they got there, however, the king was nowhere to be found. Perseus asked someone where Acrisius had gone. The people got tired of the old king's tyranny, came the answer. They drove him away. Nobody has seen him for years. When the people heard who Perseus was, they at once begged him to take the crown. So Perseus became the king of Argos and Andromeda, his queen. But before stepping to the throne, Perseus returned to the gods' magical gifts. He knew that his days of adventures were over. Life in Argos agreed with the three travelers. Yet sometimes Perseus grew bored, with no serpents to fight nor gorgons to kill. Whenever this happened, he would hold athletic contests. Often he would even join himself. One day Perseus was taking part in a discus throwing contest. A crowd of people stood by watching. As Perseus swung his arm to release the discus, it slipped from his fingers. The heavy object flew into the crowd. Before anyone could even cry a warning, it struck an old man dead. Perseus ran to the body. What have I done? He cried. Who is this man? A hush fell over the crowd. At last someone spoke. Why, I recognize him. It's old King Acrisius, returned at last. But look what's become of him. Perseus stared down at the tired, wrinkled body. My poor grandfather, he sighed. But the gods must have planned this all along. From the beginning, this has been your fate, old man, and mine.